Hello everybody and welcome to Altab. My name's Fluffy and today I'll be showing you how to install Altab Studio Pro. I'll explain all of the key features of the add-on and I'll also show you some of the tips and tricks that you can use when using our tool. First, I'd just like to thank some people that helped me make this project happen. First, I'd like to thank Robin Squares. He's been a great help making all the videos, making all the product material, and also just helping with the product idea in general. Next, I want to thank two of my best friends, Bleached Broccoli or Sat and Divided or Jerry. They've been great help with making the product as well. They've helped me test it. They've helped really hone the idea down and just overall have been great help along the way. And last, I want to say thanks to Kitty from our Discord channel. They've been a great help with just bug testing the add-on. And as a thank you, I want to give you the Altab bundle, which is a collection of all of our tools that we've ever made and that we'll ever make. So go ahead and check your DMs. That's waiting for you right there. And now, without wasting any more of your time, grab yourself your favorite drink and enjoy. Okay, so for the purposes of this tutorial, I'll be using Blender 4.3. So just make sure you get the right corresponding version from your downloads for the Blender version that you're using. On the downloads page, you'll find a zip file that you want to grab. Make sure you don't unzip it, leave it as a zip, and simply drag and drop it inside Blender. Next, make sure the enable add-on checkbox is on and click OK. And now if we press N on our keyboard, we'll see that Altab Studio Pro has been added. It's going to prompt us to complete the installation, just restart Blender. And with Blender restarted, if we press N on our keyboard again, we'll see that Altab Studio Pro has successfully installed. That's it for the installation process. I will now just quickly show you how you would go about uninstalling this. You want to go over to Edit, Preferences, Extensions, and in here you will find Altab Studio Pro and you drop this down and you click on install. Very important, make sure you also restart Blender after uninstalling the add-on. Okay, that covers installing and uninstalling. Now we can get into the overview. So first, the row up top, that's your mode switching menu. You can switch between lighting, materials, camera, and utilities. And first thing, while we're on utilities, make sure you open the small pop-out settings and you set your key press bind. What this does is it simply allows you to select any object and press that key, and you will get a corresponding menu based on what you've selected. And keep in mind, this is context aware. So if you have a material on something, you can also select the node, press the same key, and you get a nice tool to organize your materials. I will be adding support for other UI inside of Blender and making new functions along the way. So if you have any ideas of what type of tools or what quick features would be nice to have in the context menus, please let me know in the comments down below, or write us an inbox or reach out on our Discord server. I'll be really listening for any feedback regarding this tool, as I really want to make this kind of the productivity tool for Blender. Okay, with that said, let's return back to the lighting panel. So first thing you're gonna notice, you can pick categories of your presets. You've got colorful, monochromatic. All the previews are gonna load for the first time after you install the add-on. And down at the bottom, you have legacy presets. Now, these are all the presets that we've shipped on the very first version of Altab Studio. They come included with this update too. They've gotten some updated previews, but the lighting setups themselves remain the same. Right beneath that, you're going to find the Light It Up button. What that does is it simply appends the selected preset to your scene, and it centers it on the 3D cursor. So if I were to move my 3D cursor here on the side, select the preset and press OK, you're going to see that a box gets added with all of my lighting setups. Now, with some lights in the scene, you will also see the lighting manager. Now, the first tip that I can give you guys with Altab Studio is you really want to use it slightly more extended than your usual Blender add-ons. So simply grab the edge and extend it out. So with that extended, it really gives us a nicer feel for the tool, and also we get to see more information on it, which is always helpful. Now, the lighting manager itself is very self-explanatory. Up top, we have the filter row. This simply allows us to show or hide certain properties that are being shown with our lights. So I can toggle the type, I can toggle the name, I can toggle the colors, I can bring up buttons that I need or hide buttons that I don't need. So it's something really useful. This row will really allow you to customize the tool to your specific needs. For example, I often have it set up just like this, because all you really need is the color values and the power values, and then deleting lights if you don't need them. Now, you might have noticed this small button here. By the way, if you hover your mouse on any button in Altab Studio, you will get a quick description of what that button does. If you don't have this ridiculously big mouse, you'll actually be able to read it. But what this button does is it just randomizes the color of the light in the row. So you can randomize individual color of the lights, or you can randomize all light colors at the same time. And now to see some of the lighting setups in action, I've just put together a very simple scene. We're gonna select our Suzanne, press Shift S and set cursor to selected. That way it's gonna snap to the origin and be perfectly centered on the Suzanne. We're going to enter rendered view, select our preset and click light it up. You can see the lights get added and we get this nice little empty around our object, which allows us to control the lights in any way. We can rotate these lights to get different looks. We can even press double R to allow free rotation and get really unique looking lighting. Just with a single preset, you can get various lighting setups from it. Another thing I want to point out is the power values of these lights. If you want to change multiple at the same time, you can simply grab any of them. So you hold left click and you drag down, and this will allow you to select multiple lights at once. And then you can drag left and right to control the power values of these lights. You can right click to cancel. And another quick tip I can give you, this is, by the way, these things are universal to Blender. So if I were to select my Suzanne and just click item, I can also click and drag on the scale, for example, and just scale the Suzanne together. So this is something that's present in all of Blender. The same way as this is present, you can drag and drop color sockets. If I set my lights to this blue and I want to match these two, I can simply drag and drop and my lighting is matched. You can also hover your mouse, press Ctrl C, hover your mouse again and press Ctrl V, and that will also paste your color. So that's kind of just the main navigation of the lighting panel. Of course, this updates in real time. So if I were to select the light and duplicate it, I can then have it right here. And it just allows me to quickly manage my lights, do everything I need with them. If I think I have too much of some lighting, I can do that. I can use the focus button. This will show it in the viewport, which light I'm trying to manipulate. So it's pretty self-explanatory. I suggest you jump in, hover your mouse around a bit if you don't know what a button does, and you'll figure it out really quickly. Moving on to the material section, it's pretty simple. We have a used and unused material section. Now what this does is it just scans your blend file for all the objects and their materials, and it determines whether an object that's in your scene is also utilizing that material, or if you just have unused materials laying around in your blend file. Those materials can add up to increased file size or reduced performance, so it's really important to keep your blend files clean. That's why you have this nice little overview which you can use to simply delete materials you're not using. For example, if I delete the Suzanne, it means that material is no longer being used, so I can remove it or I can keep it if I wish so. Moving on to the camera section, you will see that it's showing these settings for the active camera. So for example, if I have a duplicate other camera, now you see I have two cameras, it will show these settings for the active one. So if I switch between them, you can see it's showing settings for that one, and you'll see it's showing settings for this one. On the drop downs on the camera tab, you will find every single setting that affects the camera or the viewport or the final render. So things like color, sample count, depth of field, composition assists, everything like that. And then down at the bottom, we have a unique feature to Studio called camera recording. But first, let's go into camera resolution. You see I'm able to change the camera type. I'm able to set the resolution of my render, my clipping distances, my orthographic scale if I'm using orthographic, or my lens if I'm using perspective. So just one panel to group those settings together. Next we have depth of field, and if we toggle that on, let me also make this a tiny bit bigger for you. If we toggle that on, it allows us to pick our focus point. You can enable this toggle and this will show this yellow cross, and that allows you to pin the focal length. So if we set our focus right there where it intersects with the eye, we can see that we can adjust the f-stop and we get nice looking results. Next, in the viewport settings, you can control the amount of this word that I cannot pronounce. That simply allows you to just show the render or also stuff outside of the camera's view. The viewport camera size simply affects the visual camera size in your viewport. Moving on to composition assist, you can toggle all of these composition assists, but before you do that, I want to give you a tip. If you go under viewport overlay menus and you turn off extras, then when you turn off these menus, it will really declutter your visual and you can really focus on the guidelines themselves. Another quick tip is you can click and drag these to enable all of them or as many of them as you'd like at a real quick way, so you can just toggle them on and off when you need them to frame your shot better. Moving up to render settings, this is basically grouping every single color managing property inside of Blender. So we have the look, you can change your color profiles, You can set your contrast, you have your exposure levels, your gamma levels. Now in Blender 4.3 and above, you also have white balance, so you can change that if you want. And down at the bottom, you have all the important sample settings. So things like using a denoiser or not in the viewport, in the render, all of the sample settings and everything that you commonly use or change when working on different scenes. It's all in one condensed tab. And now moving on to the camera recording tab. Now this is a unique feature to AltTap Studio. It allows you to use your keyboard and mouse to control the camera. I've been using this a lot and it's something that really will save you a lot of time. For me personally, I like fiddling with curves, but oftentimes I just find myself using this as this is just so much quicker than any other camera method I've tried. Okay, so with the camera in our scene, if we press record camera, you're gonna see that if I now move my mouse, I already have access to looking around with the camera. Now if I move with WASD, you can move around. You'll see that the frame range has changed. That's simply to allow us unlimited recording. It will revert back to what you've had before right when you click stop recording. So you can move up and down with E and Q, and you can enter walk mode by pressing tab. Now with tab set, you can look around and you can walk up. And if you'd like to change the speed at which you're walking, you can scroll up. And now you see that we're just walking pretty fast. If you press tab, it will enter like a slow walk mode that you can use to get some like dynamic camera shots. And if you hold down shift, you will basically sprint. Now say that's our motion and we click left click to confirm and we click stop recording. You will see that on our timeline, it has created all the keyframes for our camera motion. And now if we play that back, you'll see that it is pretty stuttery. It looks just the way we recorded it. It's not smooth, it's not cinematic, it's not really dynamic. So what you can do is you can press the smooth keyframes, and now this works in steps. So each time you press it, it will add a smoothing step. I will press this around like 4 or 5 times usually. It gives you a good smoothing result, and of course you can just experiment with it. So now that we've smoothed the animation, let's give it a nice preview, just see what we've done. So you can see it looks really nice and smooth. And it's such a simple way to get great looking results. It's not as jittery as it was when we recorded. It's dynamic, it's fast, it allows you to just frame your shots how you would if this was a video game. To add on top of that, what you can do is you can press the noise keyframes, and what this will open up is the noise control tab. If we now press play on our timeline, you'll see that the camera has some type of motion. And by controlling the scale, you can increase the frequency of the camera shake and also control the strength. So I suggest you play with these values to see what you like. A value that I like to do is I increase the scale on the y-axis to 100 and the strength to 1. And now what this will do is it will introduce this nice little swaying motion, and that becomes really nice when you compare it with some smoothing and nice camera shots like this. And of course, if you combine this with something like depth of field and a little bit of motion blur, you can get some great looking results just straight in your viewport. And you can then keyframe the focal length of your camera and get really quick, dynamic looking shots. Something like this would traditionally take quite some time to animate. You can do it with curves, you could do it by hand animating the camera position, but this, in my opinion, is just a more fun way to do and to think about your camera moves in your scene. And it also gives you this feel for your scene. It kind of becomes like a video game and you get to play around with it and just explore it as you would if you were in a game. Moving on to the Utilities tab, the first thing we'll cover is Asset Master. Now, if you drop this down, first you'll see that you need to set a folder. Now, what this folder is in your asset browser. If we press T, you see how here on the side you have many asset libraries, and you can control these if you go into Edit, Preferences, and File Paths. You can add and remove your asset libraries over here. By setting this path, you're essentially telling Blender, hey, this is where I want to save all of the assets that I mark, and also point this folder to my asset browser to basically say, hey, everything I ever save with Asset Master, store it in that one folder, and then no matter where or what project I'm working on, show me that folder in my asset browser. So I've gone ahead and created an empty folder in a location I like, and I will just add that to the file path. And now if we drop this menu down, you will see that we have the Asset Master folder. Now the name of this is gonna match the name of your folder, so just keep that in mind. And if you want, again, to rename that, you can go to Edit, preferences, file path, and simply double click here and you're free to rename the library name here. Now we have two buttons to mark and to clear assets. If we go ahead and mark, you'll see that you're able to select what type of things you'd like to mark in this scene. For example, if I were to mark my objects, it will mark all of the objects in my scene. And now the reason we don't see them here yet is because they haven't been saved to the folder yet. But if we go to our current file, you'll see all the assets that I've saved. The same way you mark assets, you can clear assets to remove. So for example, if I didn't want to mark these cubes over here, I could go clear assets, selected objects, and click OK, and it will just remove them. And now last, you want to save assets to the master folder. Now this just reloaded my blend file and saved everything to the asset master. So if we switch from the current file to the asset master folder, you'll see that we have all of those assets saved in there. So now if we go ahead and open a new Blender file and we switch to our asset browser, switch it to the master folder, we'll see all of the assets that we used in that project here in this scene. Now next up we have the quick render preview. Now what it basically does is it takes all of your render settings that you have set up currently for the final project, it saves all of them and it changes the render engine to Workbench, and then it loads the most optimal Workbench settings for the render to be as fast as possible. And after the render is done, it simply reverts back to everything you've had before. So even on that step, it's already saving you a lot of time because you don't have to go in there and change all of the settings and then render it out and then save it all back and then put it all together to even see the render. You can simply click the quick render preview button. It will open up this pop-up where it will tell you your current render resolution. You can define what percentage of that you would like. So let's do 25 just so this is even quicker. We'll set our frame range from around 300 to 500 and we'll actually enable all of the cavity shadow and specular highlights. Now when I press OK, it will open up a console that will just show me that everything is rendering and you can see the progress. And once it's done rendering, it will open up this small little window with your render preview inside and you can bring that up and see your animation in motion. Now you can click and drag on the window to preview each frame by frame. And of course, if you want a higher quality render than this, just define your percentage. So by using this feature, you can quickly get a sense of the animation in your project. And it is really quickly to iterate and to actually input more creative ideas and make more creative decisions when working on your projects. Now, the next thing I want to show you is the outliner tools. Inside of this menu, you will find some quick buttons to sort the outliner, reveal stuff, and select objects by type. And down below, you will also see the color settings. So what the sort outliner button will do is it will take all of the objects that are not currently in a collection. So just the things that were left outside of a collection and are completely unorganized, and it will move them into newly created collections that will also be color coded. So I've made a fake file here with just a bunch of duplicates that are not categorized in any way, but let's pretend that's our scene. We can simply click sort outliner and then collapse all of these collections, and it's all neatly organized. All of our cameras in one place, all of our meshes in one place, all of the lights, everything we would have had in the scene is nicely organized. Now the reveal in outliner simply allows me to select any object, then click reveal in outliner, and it will open up the collection that it's in and highlight it for us, and that way you can toggle certain things that you want to modify. Select by type simply allows you to select all objects of a certain type at once, so it's pretty easy if you want to move all of your lights, all of your empties, all of your meshes, if there's just something that you want to do really quickly, kind of a batch operation. Now moving on to scene tools, this is a very simple but pretty useful utility that you can use to identify objects with a high poly count in your scene. Sometimes you're using other models that you didn't make, stuff from Blender Kit, stuff from Fab or any other marketplace, and you sometimes don't realize that it's pretty high poly count and it's chugging your scene down and you're confused and why it's happening and why is it all of a sudden lagging. This tool allows you to just color the objects by poly count, and for which you have the poly settings down below, so how many vertices will define which color your models will get. Now keep in mind, this is only gonna color them in solid viewport mode, so if you go ahead and into rendered mode, they will all be fine, and you can also reset those colors back to default once you're done inspecting your scene. Now, the time tracking tab is pretty self-explanatory. When you'll be working on a project, Studio will keep track of how much time you've spent in it and return it to you in minutes and hours. This can be very useful if you're charging for your time, for example, if you're doing client work, or it can just be a useful insight into the amount of time you spent on a certain project. Now, moving on to the diagnostics tab, this will simply allow you to scan your entire file and get useful information on it that will help you identify some problems or just get you a nice overview of what you're working on. For example, in the scene info tab, we'll see our VRAM and RAM usage on our scene. In the objects tab, we'll see how many objects we have, how many of those have keyframes, constraints, modifiers. So in this scene, we can see that we have a lot of objects that have a lot of modifiers applied to them. Maybe perhaps we could think of combining these objects into singular meshes, simplifying things down, maybe throwing some decimate modifiers on there to reduce the poly counts. So it gives you a quick overview of everything inside of your file, and it's very useful to have. So now that we're done with the add-on side of things, we can close that down and we're going to move on to the context menus. Now, context menus are super useful. I would argue it's one of the best features of Alt Studio. What they allow you to do is you select any object and you simply press the assigned keybind and you get properties for that selected object. Now, for mesh objects, we have the vertice and face count, we have the estimated RAM and VRAM usage. These are all super useful for kind of monitoring your objects. You have the object dimensions and you can just change its display type over here, and you also have the scale. You can also quickly change the material that the object is using, and you can also reveal it in the outliner, which will quickly open up any collection that contains that object. You can do a pop-out shader editor for your object, and you can also snap it to the ground. So for example, if I had a sphere over here and I just wanted to be perfectly aligned with the ground, you just press snap to ground. Now, if we select an empty and press the keybind, we will get the display type for the empty alongside its size property, and that way we can quickly change that as well. Moving on to lights, when we select the light and press the keybind, we will get a lot of options. We can change the light name, we can change the light type, we can adjust the color of the light, its power values, and then depending on the light type, we can adjust its settings. So for spotlights, we got spot and blend, radius. For area, we have the size and the spread, and of course for point, you have the radius, and right below you have the randomize color button. Now for curves, you have a very basic menu, but it's usually enough for what you need. You have the curve depth, the curve resolution, and of course your bevel resolution, alongside filling the caps. You can select the material that the curve is using, and some other nice feature is you can attach an active camera to your curve, and then based on that you will get some camera settings to follow the curve, to add a track to constraint automatically, to track an object. So it's really handy. You can just draw a curve and attach a camera to it if that's what you want to do. Now, text objects, they have a lot of settings. You can change, of course, the font of the text. You can change the offset. You can change the extrude and the bevel depth, bevel resolution, just the size of the object, the shear of the object. You can align the text, you can space character, words, and line, and of course define what material it's using. So it's really quickly to throw in any text into your projects and just kind of adjust it to your liking. Now for the camera settings, of course you can click right on the camera and get its values over here, but this is most useful when you're in the camera view. You simply click on the edge and you get your pop-out settings, and that way you can control all of the settings that you would need for your camera. Now the same applies to armatures and bones. You can display certain display certain values on the bones, just how you have access to that in the viewport settings. You can change what type of bone it will be displayed as. So these are just some basic controls that you're going to use in a lot of these base objects that Blender has to offer. And now context menus don't stop there. For example, if I open up a shader editor here on the side and I click on my material, I can select any of these nodes. For example, if I select all of the image texture nodes, press my keybind and enable color, I can paint these orange. Let's do like that. And click paint all selected nodes. This allows me to quickly organize nodes in my node tree. I can of course also add a frame, click the frame, enable the color on that as well, give it a label just for test, and you're gonna see that I can adjust label size. And of course, if I had a messier node tree, let's say that my node tree for some reason was organized like this, I can select the node, press one keybind and click organize nodes. And what that will do is it will align my nodes in a way that's more visually pleasing and easier to understand how things are connected to each other. The same goes for the outliner. I can simply move my mouse here, press the same keybind, and I get quick controls for that. Now, this is a feature that I'm still working on, and it's something that I'm really gonna keep an eye out to improve it as much as I can. So please let me know on Blender Market, on Discord, on the YouTube comments, wherever you can, if you think of something that would be useful to have in these quick control menus. So there's certain operations that you always do in the graph editor, or on the timeline, or on the modifier side of things, or perhaps in any of these settings panels. I've built a way to detect where the mouse is and what type of UI it is, and then also look at all the objects or items selected in that UI. And based on that, I can give you certain shortcuts or options or build new functionality upon that. So please, if you really have anything to say about this feature, let me know. I'll be listening very closely to improve this as much as we can, since this is something that I actually use on every single project. And if I don't have Alt Studio installed on like a Blender version that I'm using for that project, I just keep pressing something and no pop-up menu is happening, and I keep forgetting I have to navigate back down to the regular menus. So it's something that once you get used to, it becomes second nature, and I really want to hone that feeling down and give it as much usability as I possibly can. And with that being said, I think this wraps up the video for now. It was a pretty long tutorial and overview, but it is a complex tool. I hope you guys are going to find it useful. I thank you all very, very much for all the support and for waiting for this update. It's been a long time in the making. I hope I delivered in some way on my promises of how I'm going to improve and take this tool further. So with that all being said, thank you again very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of the day, and see you in the next video.